Going to be introducing you. So let me see who's closest to the stage. Oh, Dr. Athena Ganchorre, sorry, is closest to the stage. And I'll have to say that I have known her for a long time, and then she made me realize like how old this dress is, because she says, I remember that dress. And that was before like 9/11. So. And she's an assistant dean of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, College of Veterinary Medicine, assistant research professor, College of Education, University of Arizona. Her work focuses on the social context for student learning in the biomedical sciences. She's also played leadership roles in medical schools. Her leadership has led to the increase of underrepresented students who enter medical school by 10% and their retention by 84%. She's a sought-after consultant in biomedical education, curriculum, and those types of factors that contribute to student success and retention. Okay, and then next we have Dr. Rachel Lauer, and she's associate professor here in the Department of Earth, Energy, and Environment. Her research aims to understand the hydrogeology of the seafloor and the role that it plays in supporting biodiversity. This work has afforded her the opportunity to do research in Alvin, a deep water submersible, and Octopus Odyssey, a transdisciplinary team that found a deep sea octopus nursery. In addition, she's a passionate educator who has developed courses and mentorship to support student learning and meaningful engagement in earth and environmental research and contemporary issues. So thank you, Rachel. And we also have Dr. Maha Ibrahim, and she is currently the manager of undergraduate student services in the Faculty of Science. She's embarked on a remarkable journey from Sudan, where she earned undergraduate degree in geophysics. Since then, she has had a remarkable research trajectory that ranged from exploring the geology of the Rocky Mountains to examining asteroid samples from NASA missions. Although is not currently actively involved in research, Dr. Ibrahim stands as both a scientist and a mentor, weaving her journey seamlessly between earthbound studies and planetary science. And also, just one other person who was not here, she regrets because, there's something going around, and whatever it is, she caught it. But I'm just going to read her bio anyway. And it's Dr. Kori Czuy. She is Métis Polish and has a PhD in storing and mathematics. She is the Indigenous Engagement Specialist at the Telespark Science Center. She is on an ongoing journey to weave together multiple ways of knowing, being, and doing science that is relational, relevant to all, and includes a teaching of land and cosmos. She has a podcast called Ancestral Science that explores and shares the depth of scientific knowledge within stories that humans have been gifted from the star, land, and animal ancestors for thousands of years. And Tiara, why don't you? Okay, Tiara's going to help to moderate.
Yes. So to start, we want to ask if you could further describe your area of research and work, and also what excites you most about it. We can start here and make our way down. Oh, we'll start here and make our way down.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the question. Much of my work has been supporting students along the pathway, the STEM pathway, K through 12, 13, 14, four-year college. I don't know. I ended up just continuing along the educational pathway, and now I'm in the professional education, primarily in biomedical sciences. And what influenced me? How did I find my way?
Well, if you want to share that.
Oh,
and what excites you most?
Okay, so I think the main piece is that I didn't see folks that looked like me. I wasn't encouraged as a young person to pursue science, and in fact, I got the opposite message, right? Like, there's no space for you. No one what makes you think that you can do it? No one ahead of you has done it, which is a terrible thing to say to me, because then I'm very stubborn. So I set out to pursue science. And then as an undergrad, actually at UC Santa Cruz, I participated in an NIH grant that supported underrepresented students in biomedical sciences. And as you know, our talk earlier this morning, I was a student on a selection committee for the program coordinator of the program, and it opened my eyes to actually, you don't have to just do science to help be represented in science, that you could actually support students and create and build programs, and that got me excited, and so that started a 30-year career building programs to increase and excite diverse students in STEM.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, and to our next panelist.
So it sounds like you might have answered 2 questions, but I'll start with it, which is great. I think in terms of what excites me about what I work on now, I have the incredibly lucky opportunity to do deep ocean work, where I get to go places and see things that no one has ever seen before. And I like to think about our ocean as inner space. We know very little about it. We've seen about 5% of it with human eyes or robots. And I'd personally like to have a future where we understand the planet we live on. Just to track a little bit with what Athena just talked about, I mean, my career started in psychology. I'm now in geophysics, which are clearly not connected to one another. But my career started with basically being in 6th grade and being loud and told to stand in the corner of the room because I couldn't behave myself. Later that was clearly ADHD and all sorts of other issues. But it ended up leading me to find passion within physics, and ultimately switching into psychology because I didn't have the confidence. I didn't see myself as a scientist, and no one saw me as a scientist, which I think is half the reason I've stayed in this job. I'm the first woman hired in geophysics in the history of our program, so, and still the only one in our department. And I think as hard as it is, I also have the privilege of being a white woman and have had very different experiences and opportunities and obvious privilege that allowed me to get where I am today. Yeah.
Yep. Hi everyone. Thanks for having me here too. So I come from Sudan. That's in Africa, and I think I got lucky. I was born to 2 parents who were highly educated, even though they were very poor, and they both went into the sciences just by the design of the educational system. I didn't really think much about it. I just kind of drifted into a pathway, and I found myself studying science. And I think I fit where I was because of the educational system. Most women in my country just funnel into a faculty where they have the grades, and it happened to be that girls work hard, very hard, so they occupy most of the STEM programs. And so I guess even though in a 3rd world country, we don't have this issue of women in STEM. That said, once you finish your undergrad, you realize that the world that we live in is dominated by men. And so I knew I had to leave my country. What excited me about being a scientist in my country is the environment that I inhabited. So I lived in the desert. The geology there was so old, fascinating. And then I moved to Canada, where I moved very close to the Rocky Mountains, and that was just amazing, majestic. It's textbook geology, and for a geologist/geophysicist, it was just incredible. Along the way, again, the timing. I was in Sudan when a meteorite fell in the desert, and I got involved in that because I think, to answer the main question, I am very curious. I'm inquisitive. I ask a lot of questions. I was encouraged to ask questions, even though my society was not necessarily as progressive as my parents. So I was there in the right moment, at the right place, and I got surrounded by supportive people who encouraged that curiosity. So, thank you.
Yes, thank you all. They were all very great answers. So we just watched this wonderful film, Woman in Motion, and we're wondering kind of what were some aspects of Woman in Motion that resonated with you the most and why? And either one of you can feel free to start.
I was blown away by the power of outreach. I mean, I didn't understand that story fully. I knew her role in amplifying women and people of color in the NASA program, but I did not realize how much change could come from, what was it, 4 months of her prolific outreach. And I think that's, unfortunately, it's something we don't have a lot of time to do as scientists, but it's really inspiring to realize how much change can come from that type of work. And she's amazing as a human, obviously.
Yes.
And the music, I had no idea she was also a musician, that voice. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think it was there were many powerful pieces in that movie, right? You know, now I actually had a pre-doctoral fellowship from NASA. It was the Harriet G. Jenkins Fellowship, and it provided me the opportunity to pursue my doctoral degree in molecular biology. And so I'm a benefactor of a lot of the NASA, you know, the efforts NASA has put out there to recruit underrepresented folks in STEM. It aligns a lot with my own career in recruiting students and ensuring that not only do we recruit, but we provide those resources and the community and the support once they get to post-secondary and professional. The issues that Dr. Worsley, you spoke about earlier, about your students and seeing them as human and supporting them as a whole human, continue to be my practice throughout my career, and hearing how Nichelle spoke about the folks as family, the folks that she recruited as family, that she had that that framework of care and compassion and empathy, I think is a huge and probably a singular characteristic that we could all embody and support those that we care for in the STEM fields and those around us, both colleagues and peers. So that really hit home, because it is lonely if you're pursuing that career and there's very few of you, but to find satellites of support like that is incredibly, I don't know, I don't even have words, because it along the pathway just had these moments of experiences and people who believed in me, that told me keep going, and I just saw that in Nichelle, and it just affirms the work that I do, what I've heard, among our colleagues here today. So, yeah, I'll stop because it's so emotional.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so I came halfway through the movie, but it was very powerful, especially the last bit about the Challenger mission. So in Sudan, we work with very limited resources. So really, the word outreach, I didn't learn about it until I came to Canada. That was 2010. However, the year I left Sudan, when I got involved with the meteorite hunting in the desert, I think it was a form of outreach because many scientists from around the world came to Sudan to look for this meteorite, which was very special in that people observed it when it was still in space, and that was the first of a kind type of meteorite. And so I got to meet maybe 20 to 30 people from all over the globe and had amazing conversations while we were looking for that, throughout the desert. And one of the people whom I've met worked for NASA as an outreach program coordinator. She was a professor at the University of Maryland. And I don't want to make it sound like a Cinderella-esque story, like you referred to earlier, but she became someone who was very pivotal in my academic journey. I already got an admission to Calgary, and I got involved with her in terms of her working with a lot of graduate students from all over the map to just encourage them to keep going. And I think having someone in the background who checks in and says, hey, how are things going? And did you hear about that grant? And this is how you write an application. And this is where you can go. And this is how and when you can visit here. And this is what's available for someone who's a first generation grad student. There are so many things I just didn't even know existed. What were they? Am I even eligible? I always thought of a lot of pieces of science as belonging to other people. And she's someone who really introduced me to the idea that, nope, this is actually for everyone. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, can't see. Oh. So, you've all highlighted very different paths that you've kind of taken to where you are now. And what we're wondering is kind of what were some of those challenges that you faced along the way throughout your pathway to STEM, as well as what or who helped you along the way? I'll let y'all decide who gets to answer. Go back to side.
So I think it's a privilege to be born to educated parents. We were very poor, but I think my parents really paved the way for me to just think of what's available as, okay, best lemonades could be made from any lemons. And the second thing was, I guess, we had a kind of a dictatorship of a system where I was just funneled into the Faculty of Science from the get-go without really being given an option. So it kind of worked in some ways. But I think the real challenges didn't really take place until I was almost finished with my undergraduate, because I started hearing the word woman a lot. So it became apparent to me that in the industry related to geoscience, women don't get hired because they're not allowed to go into the field. And you don't want to hire a geoscientist without having them do field work. So pretty much maybe my intermediate year, I knew that I had to leave Sudan. That was the first challenge. And I really didn't want to leave Sudan at the start, but then I realized that it has to happen. And then I came to Canada, and the challenge was assimilating and integrating myself into a new culture. But also the way people do science here is different than where I come from. And it really was a shock to my system, because you start questioning your identity. First off, I'm a woman, I knew that, but in Canada I discovered I'm black. I know it's kind of a weird thing to say, but you don't really notice that type of identity until you come to this culture. So I got rid of one challenge only to be introduced to a new challenge, which was kind of interesting. But really what helped is that I was surrounded by people who were very dedicated to what they did. And I think I absorbed a lot of that, and it really helped me get grounded and be focused. And I think the last challenge was post-graduation, so post-grad school. It's a completely different universe, especially if you are a first-generation immigrant. So the reality is you could be a good scientist, but post-graduation, the challenges that arise are more cultural than scientific. And so there had to be a lot of adjustments and learning from my from my side to adjust to that. So adaptability, good support, asking a lot of questions definitely helped along the way, but the challenges remain, and I really hope that we're all here having these conversations, and this helps us move forward.
Yes. And Kori?
Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'm from the US, so I'm an American. I started in public school where the guidance counselor helped you find a job, usually locally, usually in a restaurant, which was my experience initially. Did a lot of restaurant work. In terms of challenges, overcoming obstacles, I think, yeah, no one in my family had any advanced degree. In fact, my parents were the first to finish high school. I was passionate about finding a way to do physics, ultimately, which led me to a women's college, which was very fortunate because although I just finished paying off the bill for that one, it was very empowering in the sense that, it's true, 6 months ago I paid off my student loans from 30 years ago. Oh, yeah. And that was empowering in many ways, but it also wasn't giving me the degree that I really wanted because I had an eating disorder. I ended up being hospitalized, left the program, came back, and got a psychology degree because that's what you do when you're trying to figure yourself out. After a few more years of wandering around the country, more bartending, more drywalling, and other things, my parents are like, why the hell did we send you to an undergrad program that you're going to be paying for 30 years if you're going to be bartending? And I did, eventually go back to school and got a master's, did some consulting, started a PhD, and after a year and a half at Virginia Tech, realized that my PhD advisor was a creationist who believed the Earth is 5,000 years old. That is a big problem in a geoscience department. So I left that, went and got a job in a bike shop that sponsored me to ride my bike for a few years and take out the frustration of having made a horrible decision working with a creationist. Then I started a PhD again, this time in what I'm now doing. Yay. That one I finished, and the adversity that I faced in my first, I've done 11 expeditions on offshore, so on ships, in the ocean. The incredible sexism that is still dominating that world was shocking. And for those that don't know, women were not even allowed to do ocean research until the 80s. So when we were, the same years that we were watching that crash, or the explosion of the space shuttle, women were not allowed to do ocean-based research. So I've had the privilege of working with some of the women pioneers who were literally told by the captain that if they didn't get off the ship, they were not leaving port because they were not going to sail with a woman researcher. So we've come a long way, and I've been supported immensely by women I met on those early cruises. We call them cruises. There's no shuffleboard, but it's still a cruise. And some of those women have created NSF-sponsored programs that literally facilitate access for women to conduct ocean-based research and be principal investigators. And that is a labor of love that basically, this woman created an NSF program that just makes more work for her to ensure the success of the next generation of scientists like me. So yeah, I'm lucky to be where I am, but also thanks to people like Michelle and the woman I'm referring to who's really paved the way.
I think there are many turns in the road. Certainly, I thought I had many turns. And actually, I think that's amazing, and thank you for sharing your story. because certainly I think there's a rush to believe that you need to go from point A to point B, and especially under being a person of color in STEM or a woman in STEM, there's this maybe a desire to fulfill some obligation because of the pressure of your mentors, the folks who are counting on you, and make sure you have this clear path, that you know what you're going to do, and you're going to come home and make money with those hands because they're on everything. I'm sorry, but it does feel like this. I think for me, I felt like, I better have an answer. I better have my 10-second script. I better have things just laid out, because there's a lot of pressure for me to perform and have an answer, because I'm out there and I'm spending money or people have invested time in me. So that I think was a challenge, is to find my own voice, find my own way. When I decided, okay, maybe I'm not going to go to bench science, I'm taking this route where I struggle to decide, like, where am I going to put those efforts, and for whom am I doing this for? I have to balance the commitment to myself and my community. But I think the struggle doesn't go away. So I kind of also want to just mention that you did the play. I'm constantly plagued with, okay, what do I want to do when I grow up? And I've been doing this for 30 years, and I still am like, okay, what did I do the right thing? Have I had an impact? If is that enough? Can I step away? And I never feel like I can step away, because I feel like this is now, this is just who I am. This is what I'm going to continue to do. And so I think, there are definitely challenges about, like, you don't belong here. No one's going to take you seriously. You're a woman. You smile too much. I mean, all the kinds of just, you hear on a daily basis, and you're just trying to filter it out. Under all that, you're still trying to find your way that's authentic and aligns with your values and where you want to be, and that will always be there, regardless of who's the environment. And so I know it's kind of a bigger question answer, but be prepared. That's just completely normal.
Yeah. So one of the things I've kind of heard all of you highlight is all these challenges that you sometimes did and did not see coming. And so, when I think about most of us now, people like to align us to our successful selves as we are now. But it made me think back to when I was in the Peace Corps, and they said, will you talk to the new volunteers? And I said, yeah, but can I be honest? And they were like, well, what are you going to say? So I'm going to give them an honest, can I do it? I'm wondering, just with all your pathways, do you think it would have been helpful for someone to paint a more authentic story about what is possible to come? Do you think it would have, would have changed your mind, or just better prepared you for, oh, okay, I need to watch out for that? I'm just wondering.
I don't like surprises. I like to be prepared. So just give me the good and the bad, so that I can figure out, like, where are my resources? Who do I need to act? What can I activate? And because I'll make the decision in the end if I'm going to pursue. And as I mentioned earlier, if someone says I can't, you can't do it, I'm gonna find a way. It's the navigating those conversations when you're the only one at the table, and the dialogue goes sideways, and you're like, what just happened there? And that kind of mentoring I wish I had, or I would now, you know, when I have a student or I have a staff member or colleague, I'll be like, okay, we're walking into this meeting. These are the people at the table. This is the kind of conversation that might happen. Be prepared. You don't have to do anything, but emotionally, that emotional labor that you take on as the only one at the table, having to process all that, leave it, and then just decide, what am I going to do with it? It's beyond the science training, right? Those are the skills that mentoring and advising, that's where the importance of mentoring and advising comes in. And often, my colleagues and peers will have a chit chat before the meeting and we'll lay out, you know, a plan. But if you're the only one, that's hard, right? So I would have liked to have known it was hard. How did you navigate it? Because one of my mentors at Santa Cruz is the first native hired molecular biologist hired in the department. And you know, to this day, he's like, I don't know, 80? I don't know how old, but he's still out there mentoring because the landscape hasn't changed much, right, for Native, Indigenous folks in STEM, and I just think those kinds of conversations are just as important as the skills and the knowledge to do science and think science. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I don't know that if I'd been told all of the things that might happen along the way, if I would still be here, honestly. If somebody's like, you know, you're gonna get, but I'm also incredibly stubborn. So I think that's, you know, in some ways why I'm still here. I do have, you know, I think back to my PhD candidacy exam and, you know, an all-male panel judging me and how awful that experience was. And, you know, I do try and protect my students from those experiences in many ways by being honest with them about this is what this can look like. These are the range of experiences that you may encounter. I hope it's closer to this end than the other end. But honestly, you know, one of the students I brought with me on one of the expeditions last year, we were getting on a US-based ship, the same ship that I'd had a really crappy experience on 6 years prior, and he's a Muslim student from Indonesia. And so I did. I warned him, I'm not sure. I don't know how this is gonna go. In my experience, I have experienced incredible sexism and witnessed incredible racism in this environment. And I do have to say, good news, it was a very different experience. And there had been some serious reckonings come down from NSF and other agencies that at least are trying to move things in the right direction. Bye, Eric. But yeah, I think it's important to give people the whole perspective of what has happened in the past, where we hope things are going, because that's also, you know, this concept of teaching with love. If I said that to most of my male colleagues, they'd be like, that's not my job. I didn't sign up for that. I'm here to intimidate people into learning. And it's like, yeah, but that's not how we should be doing this. Even in post-secondary, there's a responsibility to have empathy, where, you know, people are experiencing mental health crises, eating disorders, gender identity struggles. Like, all of these things are happening in the 4 or 5 years that they're with us. And providing a space for them to be comfortable and feel comfortable learning and exploring all of those questions is actually part of our job. I know a lot of colleagues would disagree with that, but it made me really happy to hear and read about the work that you do, because it's like, yeah, this is what we should be doing.
Thank you.
What you just said, this is great. I mean, if things move in that direction, I think it will change the experience of doing this, doing STEM in general. So one of the questions I was expecting at the end is, what would you tell your younger self? It's like, don't do this. Sorry, just don't do it, you know. If there is an easy way and a hard way of doing things, I feel that I have been through every hard way, starting from getting a visa to come to this country, to navigating grad school, to getting funding, to renewing study permits and work permits, and it was just bureaucratic nightmares. But also within being an academic, being a researcher, and the content itself, and what you do to produce work, good quality work. It's a sink or swim mentality for everybody involved, including PIs. So I feel for my PIs, but I also feel for my older self. And now when I have so many conversations with undergraduate students asking about how do I get involved in research. As soon as they say that, my first reaction is just don't. Go do something else. Go to SAIT, learn how to fix something. You know, that's my first reaction, honestly. And I'm just being honest, sorry, I hope that's okay. But also, we don't have these conversations, and I hope that changes. But now, my contribution, and I hope a lot of people will start these conversations in terms of, this is what really happens. It's not all science is exciting. Science is exciting, but there are so many layers to doing science, and there are so many barriers to doing it that everybody's story is going to be different. There is this author, Chimamanda, and you know, The Danger of a Single Story. I just love that. Like, she had a TED Talk about it. She writes about it. And it's just, the danger of a single story is that you hear a story, it creates stereotypes. And stereotypes, their problem is that, not that they're untrue, but that they're incomplete. And so, as a mentor and as a mentee, I always have that in mind, is that the incompleteness of that story would give someone who's just starting their career a completely incomplete picture. So I always have a disclaimer when I talk to an undergrad. Of course, I want you to go to SAIT first and learn how to fix your car, and then come and do science. And by the way, while you're doing it, do it when you're much older. And it's not a career. You're not going to be rich. You're always going to be poor. And for God's sake, don't pay for grad school. Let grad school pay for it. And it's just, there should be a manual, right? Full of, here are the nightmares of doing this, like the roses and thorns type of thing. I wish that was available for all of us. Yeah. But seriously, go to SAIT first, I think, right?
Yeah, so kind of as we move into our last question, I'm going to build off what Maha just said and go into that question. So in thinking back to when you started on your STEM journey, what is one thing that you would tell your younger selves? And since Maha kind of answered that, I'll proceed this way.
I think knowing what I know now, right? So having a different worldview than the dominant culture, science in North America, or Western science, right, is positioned from this framework, and you're believed, indoctrinated into a way of thinking that silences or doesn't even open the space that there are other ways of knowing, other knowledge bases, that your perception of the world and the way you see the world has to be erased so that you can do science in this way. Like, you know, you have to, science looks like this. It looks very specific, right? And yet, all of us, when we are born curious, as right out of, at birth, we all have innate curiosity to seek and ask questions and discover on our own. We don't need a teacher. We actually do that as infants. And that over time gets silenced, you know? And so then your intuition, which isn't bad, right, is now silenced and quieted in a way that you lose because through your training in Western training, you lose that intuition or that knowledge or the kinds of questions you ask or the way you see the world is directed in a different way, and it's not affirmed. Basically, it's just not affirmed. So I think that I would tell my younger self, and just much like we talk about, well, I don't know, you know, when you're working under a microscope, or if you're working when you're looking at something brand new, the naive eye is actually extremely valuable because you don't come with preconceived ideas, right? And so when you're working with someone who's been an expert and looking under the microscope and says, this is what you're going to see and this is what you're going to see, but you actually see something different because you don't have those blinders on anymore. I think remembering that and just saying, you know, Athena, you have a different way of seeing the world, and the kinds of questions that you ask or the way you connect things, which is my special way of connecting things, you know, is valuable, right? And I think you know, how do you decolonize your mind? Really, it's like I'm even now reminded, oh, I slip into that, you know? So whether, you know, you're a woman in science, you come from different cultural, ethnic background, worldviews, you're able, you know, different ableism, able body, those kinds of questions are very different from a cisgendered white dominated culture, right? So, and when science says, oh, well, we value different perspectives, because in reality, that's the mantra, like we are interdisciplinary, we want to take different methods and approaches to solving problems, that doesn't necessarily include a diverse perspective, right? And so I find that interesting is that you'll hear that as you get trained in STEM, but when you actually bring your ideas and you're like, no, this is how we do it. Yeah. So trust in that naive, I don't even know if I want to say naive lens, just trust in your own lens and pursue those questions, ask and be curious.
Thank you. And Kori?
Yeah, I think there's, you know, I came from social sciences into natural sciences. I mean, even that transition is weird because, you know, the creativity aspect, there's no creativity in science. Yeah. Well, it turns out there is, if you're a good scientist. Yes. Like, how the hell do you do science without being creative? Especially if you're working in an environment where like just getting a single data point is like $1 million of funding. You have to work across disciplines. Yeah. So when people are like, transdisciplinarity is the new thing, I'm like, how else can we do anything in the ocean? But you know, in terms of my former self, I think my nonlinear career path is the longest career path of anyone I've ever met. I started my PhD at 37. I'm now tenured, yay. But yeah, if I had at any of those points and I could spend an hour cataloging the failures of my career, because there are many, just getting up and continuing to move in the direction of something. And I didn't even know what that was half the time. and dusting yourself off and continuing to move. And fortunately, you know, I was heading in a direction. And what I would tell my younger self is probably that path is not a failure. It's actually can be a superpower. And I think, you know, for me, at my age, I just don't care anymore about not sharing some of the struggles, because I think especially our really good students need to know that you don't have to there are no wrong decisions when you're 22 years old or 18 years old. You're gonna make mistakes. We make mistakes all the time. And especially the high achieving students who are like, but I have to make the right decision. It's gonna be okay. Like, you're gonna make the wrong decision and you're still gonna succeed. And embracing that, you know, I remember when I finally started my PhD the second time with an advisor who was 2 years younger than me, 2 inches shorter than me, had a bit of a Napoleon complex, was not very nice to me. He made it seem like he did me a favor by taking me on, because he felt sorry for me having had that experience. And that was, it made me feel small. And that's the other thing I would say to my earlier, younger self, is don't let someone make you feel small because you didn't take the path they did.
And I just want to touch back. I know you kind of started answering. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Honestly, you've covered it, and I'm sorry, my teacher's voice, loud enough. You've covered what I was feeling for years, to the point where I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, my relationship with science, just like religion, it became better once I left organized science, you know. I'm sorry to say this, you know, but I feel I really enjoyed what I was doing while I was doing, but the challenges did not make sense, and at the time I didn't have the maturity, the vocabulary, or the psychological, you know, well-being to understand and to unravel that. I needed to do a PhD, and I was trying so hard by shelving all of the challenge, shelf, deal with that feels so uncomfortable, just shelf it. Why did this person say this to me? Just shelf it. Why didn't they say that to me? Shelf it. And so I didn't get this vocabulary of anything, including words like intersectionality and microaggressions and racism and systemic or structural, or nothing really made sense until I left grad school and went into doing something completely different. So if I look back and I have something to tell myself, is that you can actually leave, go make sense of things. Don't rush. I wish I started my PhD when I was 37. I didn't give myself time to do things slowly. I was driven by a lot of fear, really, a lot of fear, because I had to prove something and I didn't have a way back. I didn't have a safety net. And my life was defined by a lot of fear from a very early age, and education is the only protection you have. And you internalize that so much that it just becomes a drive, and it wasn't until maybe after my postdoc that COVID forced me to sit still and finally deal with all of that shelf stuff, and that's why I left academia. Not because of one specific person or a very just bad experience, but it's like, okay, wait, I really need to just, you know, unravel this. So I am more of a scientist now that I'm looking back at my experience, and I am finally addressing problem solving in a more scientific way that is finally making sense to me. And I'll probably go back again to being a scientist once I feel that, okay, now I'm doing this from not from a place of fear, but back from a place of curiosity that grad school beat out of me. So I think it would be, I think that would be my advice for my former self.
Yes. Thank you. And I want to say to all the panelists, thank you so much for sharing your stories. Yes. And we will open it up to the audience if they have any questions for any of our panelists. We have one.
Thank you so much for sharing So it was what Maha said at the end. It resonated with all of us here. We were all just like, yes, wow. Like, we all can relate to that. But it's still, like, I don't know if you've answered it in a sense, but how do we try to, like, because it's hard as, like, immigrants, as Black females. There's all these factors that we're trying to. That's why we're working so hard to achieve all those things, but that we don't find the time to just be like, okay, we can take a step back and just be in love and curious about the things that we're pursuing. It just becomes hard. So how do you guys this question is so how do you guys deal with that, like trying to balance it and trying to find the passion or your curiosity for the field?
So I'm tempted to just say, don't do it. No, do it. I honestly don't have a solid answer. So there are things in life that I'm just realizing you have to just do them yourself. And it's going to be a rough ride, and it's really sometimes not fun. But if I had a time machine and I would go back, I don't think I would change any of it, even though some of it was just pure hell. But I am the person I am today with what looks like kind of wisdom, even though it's not, because of what I had to go through. What I wish I did was just have a little bit more confidence in myself, which is so easy to say when you're sitting on a chair and you're 35 years old. But I heard this a lot from my mom, to the point where my mom was very frustrated in me that I am just not a confident person. Still I struggle with that. But I wish I could just give my older self or my younger self a little bit more confidence in that I am in the wilderness. I have never met a Sudanese girl studying science in Canada or anywhere. I go to so many conferences, or used to go. I've never met someone like me. And probably will never meet someone like me. And even if I meet someone like me, she probably didn't grow up with 3 boys, or had a very poor family, or navigated very unconventional parents, or like it's just never going to be exactly the same thing. So the only way to do it is to just, you will be the only version of that story, then you will do it. And have good friends. Have good friends. I wish I invested more in my relationships outside of my work. I was so married to my scholarship because I just do things that way. I just hyper focus on things. But I wish I invested in just a collective around me who solidified and grounded me. I think that would be my only regret, is that I didn't invest in my relationships. So ground yourself outside of science so that when you have a tough ride, you still know who you are outside of it. That is what I would tell myself. I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah.
Yeah, I just want to totally agree that the only reason I got through grad school was my community. It was, an incredibly supportive group of, no offense to the men in the room, but mostly women who were also struggling. And you can't make science your whole life, unfortunately, or fortunately. And I'm lucky enough to love what I do and love mentoring. I love teaching. I hate paperwork and administrative stuff. But there is joy at the center of it. And even today, the people who I invest in my community, emotionally and with care, have given so much back that without that community, I wouldn't be here today. So, and that's people who are here at the University of Calgary now. And Maha, you should come talk to me about a geophysics problem we can work on together.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My question is about mentorship. So how do you go about navigating mentors? I know there's a lot of like organizations that are like, oh, you could find a mentor easily, but I feel like some relationships might be surface level and not really like deeper into that, like, oh, I'll help you. So how do, as being students, how do you navigate those like deeper connections with your mentors?
I'll give them a little break. So one of the ways I kind of navigated that during my PhD was, again, if you saw, I'm also one of these very determined people, and you know, I don't let things stop me. If I need to figure it out, I'm going to figure it out, because that's the community I've been ingrained in. And so when it came time for my PhD, there was no other Black woman doing science education at my school, which it probably won't happen at every school. But what you have to draw on is sometimes you have to go outside that immediate community to find people, and that is okay to do. And if you have good mentors at your school where you're at, they will support you to do that. And so, you know, I used Twitter to find people. If you read articles you like, you know, ask people, do you know this, the author of this manuscript? And, you know, trust people on like the opinions. Figure out for yourself, but kind of listen to the opinions. If everyone's giving you like kind of this good vibe, then, you know, reach out. A lot of professors and mentors, they do want to help. I will say sometimes they don't have the time, but they do want to help. So it never hurts to just ask and reach out. And this is how you start to find your community. So for example, when I did my dissertation, you know, I happened to have met Dr. Adams here at a conference on a whim in Rhode Island. If you don't know the States, it's the smallest one. It was such a random conference to be at. Yeah, and I happened to met her, and I think she came up to my poster and just started talking to me about my research. Very small interaction, but very impactful. So when it came time for me to choose the committee, and you know, you're kind of like, what do I do? What's the best option? And you know, my advisor reminded me. She said, remember that, do you remember Dr. Adams from the conference? I said, oh, yeah. She said, well, ask her. You had a good interaction. You came and told me about it. And my first reaction was, but she's all the way in Canada and probably way busy. Like, I don't know, it should be someone local. But I'm so thankful because we're still collaborating together. So sometimes you have to go outside of your immediate circle, but that's okay, because this is how you really build out your network to everybody.
Same. I actually was going to say exactly the same. Maybe what really benefited me is that I finally ventured outside of my immediate field, which was very small and specialized. But the people who became real mentors were people who were doing things, sometimes science, sometimes outside of science, that I appreciated. The way that they practice life and they practice science. I think it's the value that is shared between me and them that drove me to connect with them. And then just be consistent throughout the years. The person who introduced the University of Calgary into my sphere is someone who gave a public lecture, and I just raised my hand at the end of the talk and I just had a normal question. And the question became two, and then we connected over email, and then he said, have you ever heard of the University of Calgary? They have a great program, you should apply. And this person, I've met him now 15 years ago, and I just saw him maybe like a few months ago in front of me, and he's someone I connected with throughout years. So build a connection, but try to keep it and maintain it. I think that's the hard part. Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes you find mentors in unlikely people, and so just to add to what the panelists have mentioned too, of course, reach out, but also be open to the fact that there might be mentors who who don't look like you, who may have never, don't have a lived experience as you, but honestly are in positions that could open doors for you, and be okay with that. Like just be okay with that, because I've had unlikely mentors that just, during my graduate program, I had a 3-month-old baby, and we had a required seminar in the evening, and there was just no way I could, go back to school and be in the seminar. And this mentor just said, "Yeah, I didn't see you at the seminar." I'm like, "Yeah, I had to go home, and I'm not really sure I can make this required seminar, because it's also part of like the graduate, the graduate program, right?" And he said, "Well, if no one says anything, don't worry about it." And I was like, "What?" Because I was the only person of color in our program, and it's a cohort program, and it's obvious that I wasn't going to be there, and I didn't want to bring any more attention to myself, and I also didn't want people to believe that I was getting special treatment. But he just said, "Look, this is you're a human being as well, and if there's an issue, I'll help you out." He was not my advisor. He was just another faculty in the department, and I was just like, okay. And he ended up just continuing to show up in different ways in my career. And so, yeah, just also keep an eye out for people who might be an unlikely mentor.
Yeah, No. Oh, I was just going to echo the sentiments on both sides of me. In terms of, my PhD advisor and I did not get along, if I haven't made that clear. And it was a bit of a hostage situation towards the end. And I realized by looking around that there were people that were actually looking out for me, and facilitated my safe exit from the program. And they were people that I'd met at conferences, people whose talks I'd attended and had lunches with, other postdocs in the program who were people that sort of reached out and were like, "Hey," and I ended up having 2 of my chapters in my thesis working with those people who I found as supports and then ultimately collaborators. So if you're in a similar situation where you have an advisor who maybe doesn't want you to be mentored by someone else, that's a red flag. But also a good advisor will be, I'm thrilled that my student is working with 10 people on his 4 publications, because he's getting a diversity of mentorship that I cannot provide as a single human. So.
No one person can be everything. Yep. So, yeah. So, it's kind of like a buffet, and you pick in, like they're great for this, and that's okay. They can't be everything, and you move on, and people come into your lives, and for me, I'm like grateful for that, that interaction. I've known Jen for, I don't know, I'm not going to say too many years.
As old as his dress is.
That's right. And I see her as a mentor, right? Still looks good. So so just take that in mind, that your peers, your colleagues are also great mentors, and they have knowledge, obviously, and perspective. But yeah, not one person's gonna fill all the, check all the boxes. So.
Yeah, well, thank you all so much. But yeah, we just come, to the close of this amazing first day, the first time that we've had a Black History signing event here at the University of Calgary. So at the University of Calgary, and we hope that this will not be the last. We hope that, you know, you will all like join us again like next year. And yes, so thank you so much to the panelists for sharing your wisdom, and thank you for the Black Science Student Network for being here, and the Securing Black Future students for being here and supporting, and yeah, definitely want to get pictures. Okay, and thank you all so much for being here.